Welcome back to Art 6s and 7s. I am Tommy.
Hi, I'm Rio. Today we're diving into the brutal, unsolved murders of the Keddie Cabin family.
Now the thing is, when you said that, I always see Keddie Cabin.
Yeah, I guess, I see that, and I feel like that's the way I pronounce it as well. But
Keddie, Keddie.
Keddie
Cabin.
It's the Scottish accent, it's a Keddie. A Keddie family. You know, the Keddie Snatcher and the Keddie family. But no,
But it's like the Eddie, but with a K at the start, like a Keddie.
Yeah. And I guess the Keddie Cabin, it's fitting to the story because...
Very fitting.
Yeah, as we explain, as we get on, you know what we're on about.
Yeah, we'll get onto that later, but for now, we will try and set the stage for you as best as we can. So we'll take you back 40 years and just... It is April 11th.
Did you just have a stroke?
Yeah, I think I did.
Okay.
So April 11th in 1981.
Wow.
In the tiny resort town of Keddie, California. And I believe it's like a small village in the woods.
Yeah, it's a resort town, so it's very small.
Yeah, resort town. We're looking at cabin number 28 to be specific. So anyone's lucky number is 28. Today will be your unlucky day. It was a quiet night. I think nothing out of the peculiar seemed to, happen. At least it was supposed to be, though.
Yeah, of course. It's your typical peaceful night in the woods where nothing should happen, But in this case, something gruesome and tragic did happen. And
who would have guessed on a true crime podcast that something would have happened?
I know, right? Surprise. But this case itself remains one of the most chilling unsolved murder cases in the US history, not only because of how mind-boggling and crazy it is, but also because of the fact it could have been solved there and then if the job of the police force was done right.
We'll get onto that later.
Absolutely, we will cover everything we know. And spoiler alert, the case is still unsolved, and so please do not hold your breath for any satisfying happy ending, or just please don't hold your breath at all.
Yeah, but most of these cases that we're kind of looking at, they don't really have a satisfying ending, and they're usually unsolved, but that's kind of what we're here for, just to kind of explore it and see if we, what people think about it. But
absolutely.
Let's get right into the gritty, shall we? Kind of explain the story and the whats, the whoos, the whoos, the who's, the wheres, the whys.
All I heard was let's go and do the gritty, so I'm sitting here doing the gritty,
Oh, for God's sake. You and your millennial brain.
Listen, I'm literally like 2 months older than you.
Which is even worse. Right. Anyway, at that night in the cabin, we're looking at, I think, a total of 7 people.
Yeah.
We figured it out to be. Yeah. And one of them was the mother of 5 children. Not 4 children, 5 children.
Damn.
And a single mother, if that. Her name was Glenna Sharp.
That's one more than 4, but one less than 6. For some of y'all confused out there.
Yes, exactly, math. But her name was Glenna, which is it's like a female Glenn, I guess. But people called her Sue. And then obviously 5 of her kids, which Rio will go in a minute. Sue was a single mum, just trying to make ends kind of meet after separating from her husband, and it was quite a recent divorce. So I think overall it sounds like the family you'd want to.
I wouldn't say it was a recent
one of these
divorce, as she died 43 years ago. I wouldn't say that's recent.
Oh, for God's sake! But I think this story just goes way off the rails, and whatever we're gonna kind of explain, you're not going to expect.
Oh, absolutely. So as Thomas said, I am going to introduce you to the rest of the people at the cabin that gruesome night. So as Tommy said, we have Sue Sharp, who is 36. Then we have her eldest, John, who is 15 years of age, and his friend Dana Wingate, who's 17 years of age. And also Sue's 12-year-old daughter, Tina. They were all in a cabin at some point before the horror began. And the other three are the younger Sharp kids. So Greg, who's 5, Rick, who's 10, and then the neighbor boy, Justin, who is 12. They were also in a house. However, they were somehow peacefully asleep in another room, oblivious to the carnage happening literally just feet away.
It's mental just to think how much people can actually sleep through and tolerate. Like, when you're knocked out, you can probably sleep through anything, but some people can awake through so many sounds, like cops or, I don't know, a knife stabbing into your mother's back. Like, But you also, obviously, all those children, 2 of them were friends, weren't they?
Yes. Indeed.
Yeah. And you missed one of the kids, actually.
Oh, did I?
Yeah. They were named Very Sharp.
Oh my god.
It was the knife. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
We'll go into that a bit later, but you got to
we'll get into really sharp later.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to give it to the kids, though. Sleeping through anything amongst, everything that's happening, they slept through it all. Everyone wakes up if, you hear like a slight stepping outside your door. These kids slept through a whole entire crime scene.
Oh, yeah. I feel like that's one of the things that would wake me up is my family getting brutally murdered. Oh, in the same house.
I don't think it would wake me up, I'm not going to lie.
Oh, you've slept through it already like 3 times or something?
Yeah, maybe a 4th.
Yeah, see, that's
I can't
fair.
remember this time.
It's just white noise to you.
Exactly. It's just a casual Friday night.
Yeah, it's like family murder, screams, blood spilling, white noise, same thing.
Trivial murder party, yeah.
So around 7 a.m. the next morning, the youngest boys stumble out of their bedrooms and find, a Texas Chainsaw Massacre scene.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's just bloodbath. That's horrible.
Something out the movies, yeah, let's go.
Yeah. Their brother, John, their friend, Dana, and their mother, Sue, had been brutally murdered. Tina, however, the 12-year-old, was missing.
How? Oh, that's... Oh. To walk out of your bedroom, waking up, you're going, I want my breakfast. Let's see what we have. To seeing your mother, your brother, and a friend of your brother being brutally murdered with one of your siblings missing.
You wake up, like you said, to breakfast. You go downstairs, rather than in bacon, you see your mother.
Piggy Sue, yeah. It was kind of like, it's walking onto the set of a slasher movie.
Mm-hmm.
Except it was real, and the only person that was saying cut was the murderer.
Oh my god!
There were bloodstains absolutely everywhere. John and Dana were bound with electrical wire, which is a kind of an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
They were also bludgeoned with a hammer, of course, and stabbed repeatedly. Sue herself, the mother, was gagged with bound and taped, but she was also stabbed and strangled. You can probably imagine the absolute horror that they must have kind of gone through. Not just now, but in future as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Growing up with that.
Jesus, I'd see that image. I can see that image right now, and that's going back to the previous podcast where I can see everything. As you were describing it, the reason I was so quiet is I could see them walking into a room, just 3 wee guys, and seeing that. Oh my god, it's gruesome scene.
It is very gruesome. I mean, if people did feel a bit off about that, I did too a bit. I'm not gonna lie, but
Yeah.
mm,
And you said they were stabbed repeatedly, and
yeah.
going back to the other kid, really sharp, that's when he comes in.
It was really sharp and very sharp. Like they were
Yeah.
kind of twins, a twin pair of
It was
knives.
really sharp and blunt, because the hammer.
Blunt sharp.
Yeah. Anyways, get this, right? So despite how savage the murders were, the three boys in the other room were completely untouched. The killer did not go anywhere near them. Somehow they were unharmed or even aware that anything had happened.
So they were completely clean, like no scars.
Yeah,
nothing?
They just woke up in the middle of, I don't know, Disney movie, it's like, oh, the sun is rising, it's beautiful, Peter Pan was just in my room, whatever. And just wake up and leave the room.
Good morning, my perfect brothers.
Yeah.
And then going downstairs and just screaming in horror.
Exactly. That's it.
Oh. I think it's like the killers themselves didn't even know they were there, or they just simply just didn't care. They went into the room and went,
or the killer knew
I draw the
that
line
they were there.
Young kids.
The killer knew that they're there, and that's why they avoided them, because we're going to get into some suspects and why we think they might be suspects because of the untouched kids.
Yeah, I know what you mean, though. But I think that with a level of violence and kind of almost disarray, it feels like everyone in that house should have been a target.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Not just certain family members or friends.
Yeah. Like, what makes it stranger is that, the lack of clues. There was nothing left. Like, law enforcement didn't have much to go on. Actually, so law enforcement So law enforcement just ignored all the clues, kind of thing. That's why there was nothing.
That makes it a bit.
Yeah, the law enforcement said there were no fingerprints, no weapon left behind. Just pure confusion, which I guess is perfect with our theme here at Sixes and Sevens. But it also, suspected that some law enforcement officers may have been involved in covering up evidence.
But thinking that the police and the department and everything would have been involved in the actual crime, could have they been the murderers? Could they have,
The murderer might have not been a police officer, but the murderer might be, somebody quite high up within the community and is able to pay off or even have on his payroll, the police department.
So they were kind of suspected themselves.
Yeah, basically.
Were they questioned at all?
The police officers, no, why would they question themselves?
Yeah. Well, you never know, like, who to at that point, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone's a suspect within the vicinity.
Yeah.
I think the investigation was, and kind of still is, a complete dumpster fire.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The crime scene was obviously tampered with. All the evidence was kind of mishandled. And like you said, to top it off, the whole department and the sheriff's department was suspiciously sluggish.
Yeah, and sluggish is an understatement. It's like they showed up for work and said, you know what, let's wing it. Critical evidence was either overlooked or straight up ignored. And speaking of overlooked, Tina's disappearance wasn't immediately noticed. They were also so focused on the bodies in the living room that they didn't realize a whole person missing.
How would you just miss a whole person?
Literally.
I mean, that's what happens all the time, I do guess, because it's like missing person. But there was 7 kids, and how would you just completely overlook one? I don't understand.
I'd understand.
Like, imagine if
everybody in the house was dead, then the police might not know who else was in the house. But there was 3 other kids that survived.
Yeah.
So the other kids must have been, oh, by the way, Tina's not here.
a literal child is missing.
Yeah.
But, sure, just focus on everything around you. No need to check if anyone's been kidnapped.
I'm sure the police would also be like,
murdered.
they'd go to the kids, they'd not interrogate, but they'd ask the questions to the kids of, was there anybody else in the house? Did somebody come into the house last night to talk to your mom?
Did you hear anything?
Yeah, they would ask them, was somebody else in the house with you? Because then they would suspect that person of the murder. But then, if they were to ask, was there anybody else in the house with you? Greg, Rick, and Justin would say, oh yeah, Tina. But Tina's not here anymore. And they're like, oh, how old is Tina? And they're like, 12. She was sleeping in the living room. And then the police would be like, oh yeah, of course, she's not here. She must be missing.
No, it's just something doesn't add up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's stupid. Like, Tina wasn't even declared missing until hours later, when her remains were nowhere to be found in the cabin. And it wasn't until 3 years later, right? 3 years.
Yeah.
In 1984.
3 years.
That a part of her skull was found in Feather Falls, which is, Keddie to Feather Falls is about 50 miles. And that's 50. And then when they finally put two and two together, they had to admit Tina was murdered too. Like, what the fuck?
Well, if you're finding a piece of their skull, you're not going to admit they're alive, are you?
Yeah, but couldn't
They're
they...
not going to scalp them, get rid of their skull, and then just put it 50 miles away 3 years later. Like, that has got to be orchestrated.
But why
That's
only
be
3 years later
did
did they kind of put two and two together?
It should have took them, 48 hours?
I'd say an hour max going into that place.
It's going back to the Sherry Martler, like where she went missing, but like, how long is it before you put out a search warrant?
So I'm pretty sure for a child it's 6 hours, whereas for an adult it's 48.
Okay.
But especially, like, fair enough, the Sherry Martler case, she went missing, just nothing happened. Whereas here, it's a gruesome murder scene of an entire family and a kid's missing. Obviously, you're going to presume they're dead. Or at least you'd report them missing.
Well, you'd hopefully report them missing. But I think that's where this gets interesting now. Because I think we've got to talk about the neighbours.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is a cabin, it's a resort place, isn't it?
Yeah.
And apparently some of them heard a couple of screams, heard, obviously, a lot of the events that happened that night. But do you know what they did?
What?
They did absolutely nothing.
Hey,
the only thing they probably done,
like, shut the curtains and just went on with the day.
Yeah. Just average kind of like, oh, someone's getting murdered next door. Turn up the TV. That's their business to sort out.
Huh. I mean, like, I get it, because nobody wants to be that neighbor who's, too nosy. But if you heard, blood-curdling screams, maybe pop your head out the window, just, kind of be that nosy person for a second, because, somebody might be getting murdered next door.
I mean, if you heard it yourself, if you heard like a blood-curdling scream next door,
mm-hmm.
What would you do?
I'd probably say the Hail Mary 10 times and then call 999.
Local authorities, you go, that someone just screamed next door. Please save me. Not them, save
me. Yeah, they're doomed already. They're done. Whereas I'm sitting
they're
here.
Probably already dead.
I'm sitting here, a gay atheist, reading the Bible.
I fear that Satan's going to come up for me.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, not an atheist. I'm a Satanist. And I'm sitting...
Even better. I fear that God's going to come for me.
Rather than dear God, it's dear Satan, save me from God.
Right. Getting back to it, though.
Yeah.
There are several theories, including personal grudges, or I think there was a possible drug-related motive.
Nice.
Like, there's no clear consensus overall.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of another known fact, which is kind of put in the case file itself, is one of the key suspects, obviously, was Martin Smart,
Hmm.
which is the stepfather of Justin, which was, I think Justin was still alive, wasn't he?
Yeah, he survived.
Yeah. So Martin, the stepfather, was sleeping in the cab. No, he was. Justin was sleeping in the cabin.
Hmm.
Sorry, yeah. Now this guy, Martin, let's just say he wasn't really an upstanding citizen. And I
Right.
mean, he had a sketchy past, included kind of alleged ties to organized crime, something like a mob boss or, gang affiliation. Um, Not someone that you'd probably trust with a library card,
Oh,
let
absolutely
alone,
not.
obviously, a murder investigation.
Do not let that man near our books. Let him near our children, but not near our books. Absolutely not.
You draw the line at children.
Yeah. Going back to Mr. Smart, let's not forget his good old buddy Bo Bed. Bo Bead. Bo
Bobo Beads, is that like a hobbit?
yeah, yeah, basically.
Bobo Bead.
Bilbo Baggins meets Bo Bead. That's the name within itself is a tongue twister. Anyway,
Yes, I like it.
but Mr. Bow and Martin were both staying together nearby and both had some interesting behavior patterns, but they also had inconsistencies in their alibis and behavior after the murders. But Martin allegedly confessed to his therapist that he committed the murders, but the therapist kind of didn't report it to law enforcement until several years later.
Yes.
Yeah, it's that's what I mean when I said earlier that it's somebody that's kind of high up and that can pay people off. I feel like I don't know who
Yeah,
Martin
I
is
guess.
or Bo because we only have his nickname and his first name, so we don't know how organized crime. So they could have high up connections and paying people off. That's why they paid off the law enforcement allegedly, and now the therapist who didn't say anything until years later. And the full reason why
It's just
she said
this
it.
must have been a really rich gang.
Oh yeah, like we don't know if it was a gang
No.
or if it was just the two of them that were very organized.
He might have just started up an OnlyFans and did really well for himself.
Or the
You never know.
therapist might have.
Oh, yeah. She was like, okay, you have to keep this on the down low. It's like almost... yeah, I mean, you could have blackmailed her as well.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know what was going behind the curtain. But by the time that she did tell law enforcement, Martin Smart was already dead. Pardon me. Which is very convenient.
So I think it was like until I die, you have to keep this secret.
Yeah.
Or
she was no longer threatened because he died.
Yeah, that is true. He couldn't kind of find her now.
Mm-hmm.
You never know, she might have had to move or get away from him somehow because, she was being threatened or, yeah, even worse.
Exactly.
Held captive almost. But imagine confessing to a murder and absolutely nobody cared. That's how messy this case overall was. And I think Bo had a record too, but then he just vanished completely off the radar not long after the murders. So it just sounds like a completely poorly written, mystery novel.
It really does.
Like the plot holes write themselves.
Yeah. Like, welcome to Keddie Cabin 28.
Tonight on Keddie Cabin 28, a murder. Who would have guessed?
Surprise! But the problem is the investigator...
Very Sharp, what are you doing here?
Oh my god. Back to Very Sharp. Investigators didn't exactly tie up those plot holes either. For example, the cabin had bloodstains that didn't belong to the victims, and no one could ever figure out who they came from, which I find very
Was
stupid.
it just ketchup?
No, somebody else's blood, but the police decided not to do DNA tests or samples of it or anything, like there was even a bloody fingerprint on a handrail outside the cabin, and yet it was still never matched to anyone.
That's even more disturbing.
The killer left everything. He might as well left his bloody ID there because he left something more important, his DNA. So the case was solved if the police done their job.
Unless it was like a mixture of bloods together that combined to make a new one.
And still pull it apart.
I mean, they could, yeah. I do agree there, but also at the same point, if you're in the same family, don't you have like some of the same blood genes?
Mm-hmm.
So if they combine together, would it be the same person or would it only be one of them? It kind of like that raises a question for me.
It's like ketchup and mustard, right? When you mix it together, a scientist can still tell you that it's ketchup and mustard. They're not going to say it's something else.
But does it make ketchup mustard? I don't know. Does it make ketchup mustard?
God.
Does it though? But does it? Has it created something new, or is it two different things that are completely together?
It's two different things.
Yes, I think what another question that I had is about the electrical cords that was used to kind of tie up victims. They were perfectly cut, like almost precision surgical wise. Like someone had taken their kind of time and effort, which raises obviously loads of questions like why? Is it just a random act of violence? Was it methodical? Was it, were they wanting to send a message? Did they just run out of things to tie up people with? Like,
yeah, I guess because if you get electrical cord from in somebody's house, you'd kind of just cut it off. If you had an axe, you'd whack it with an axe and cut it up. So it wouldn't be perfectly cut. So he must have really taken the time to cut every single cord.
Ooh, yeah, that does make...
Yeah. And you said something about sending a message. So, the whole crime scene felt like almost as if it was staged. So some say it was too chaotic. Exactly. Like the killers were trying to, throw off the investigators by making it look random, but others believed it was personal, maybe revenge or some kind of twisted vendetta. So that's going back to Bo Bede and Martin Smart.
Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he apparently had beef with Sue herself, like the mother. Because I think rumors were spread around, and rumor has it that Sue was advising Martin's wife to leave him.
Oof.
Yeah, which is, intertwining with a relationship, which I don't think you should be doing.
I can just imagine them sitting together by the fireplace in a cabin, and Sue's sitting sipping on a red wine, saying to Martin's wife, being like, "Girl, he's not good for you."
But that's like you talking about my relationship. It's like you don't know the ins and outs.
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
know everything. You only know what kind of they want you to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But Martin, obviously, I don't think anybody would, but he didn't take kindly at all to that.
As we can tell.
So people, as you can tell, he could have murdered him. But the theory goes that he snapped, and then obviously went on a rampage, killed Sue, and killed everyone in the house apart from the kids, kind of like as a payback. Just like, oh, I'm gonna kill your mum just because she's getting in the way of my relationship, like.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right?
Should do.
He got revenge. He killed everyone but, his kid. And the reason he didn't kill the other two kids that belonged to the family is because they were in the same room as his kid, and he could compromise the mission almost by waking Justin up, and then Justin having to see that it's his dad. So he just decided to leave that room completely untouched. So it makes sense that it would be Martin. But then if it wasn't Martin, we don't want to stick to one person. We want to explore all the different corridors. So if it wasn't Martin, then why kill John and Dana? That's where things kind of get muddy. You kill John and Dana, then why not go into the other room to kill the other kids?
Yeah, like all of them shouldn't be a target. Like going back to what I said,
Yeah.
why was it just what 4 people?
Unless
It
it
could have
was
been
Martin.
all of them.
The
Yeah.
the only scenario that makes sense in my head is Martin killing
Mm.
them and then not going to the other room because his kid's there.
Well, now that you say it out loud, it kind of I'm thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you don't. I mean, he could have just followed through and killed his kid as well, but you wouldn't really want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You'd kill the other two, but then he would wake up and go, "Dad, why are you killing people?" Like,
Yeah, exactly.
screamed and horrified out of his head.
Mm-hmm.
But I think going back to kind of all of them, why abduct Tina? What's that got to do with it?
Oh,
Like
very
some
true.
people kind of just theorized that she was taken just because she witnessed the murders herself, or she hid away, or it was more sinister reasons behind it.
But then why
Her
not kill
amount,
her there if she witnessed the murders, like the other kid?
maybe there was just a piece of the puzzle that you know this like a hostage or something, so they could get away,
Yeah.
or experimentation. There's so many avenues that you could go down.
Yeah, I guess.
Um, but the remains being found 50 miles away 3 years later just adds so much more. Because so much could have happened within the 3 years. Like, did the killers take her? Decide that she was too risky to keep alive, and then go, oh, I should have killed her there and then. Is it? Oh, I don't know. She's still alive. People are still looking for her. Or they've caught glimpses. Like, hmm.
Yeah, because I guess in a case file that we used for research, it didn't really say anything about how long she had been dead by the time they find her remains. I guess she must have been dead for a while, so I don't think she was alive for those 3 years. Because her skull was
No.
found. So I'm guessing she was killed not long after the actual murders. So I don't think they had much time with her.
That's another thing. Why just the skull? It could
Right.
have been, I don't know, it could have been the brain matter, it could have been a leg, it could have been an arm. Why the skull?
I guess we may never know. Um, but we do know is that this case remains a tangled mess of loose ends. And over the years, new evidence has surfaced, but nothing has brought us closer to solving the murders. It's been over 40
Mm.
years, and we're still left scratching our heads.
Oh, no, I was literally scratching my head throughout most of this episode because there's a lot of things which don't add up.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I want to understand a bit more, but you can't because, the kids are dead, the mother's dead,
Yeah, and
the police officers, the department are terrible.
you never know. Some um, nowadays, somebody might reopen the case and decide to look into it again, and they might help the case, they might solve the case, or I don't know. But we can never give up on cases like this, and hopefully, people keep doing everything they can to
Mm.
reopen these kind of cases.
Well, you get me on to my next point, which is investigators themselves,
Mm-hmm.
so not the department, like completely new people, reopened the case kind of 11 years ago in 2013,
All right,
which is
okay.
quite recent.
Yeah.
So 30 years later, they found a hammer in a pond near Keddie,
Oh wow.
which was believed to be used in one of the murders, one of the bludgeonings.
Mm-hmm.
But like everything else in this case, it just leads to more questions than it does with answers. It just goes, instead of saying, oh, this is a hammer, this was used for this, it was, oh, we've just found a hammer. Why was it used? Where was it used? When was it used? Who used it? Like this.
Why is it in this exact pond? Why is it dumped? Well, one answer reveals 60 questions.
Is this just a hammer that some random crackhead threw in the pond?
Yeah. But honestly, if it were up to me, the Keddie Cabin 28 feels like it belongs in a Twilight Zone episode. Just when you think you're getting close to an answer, something throws you back into the lip of confusion and frustration.
It also does sound like a really, really good TV kind of name, I guess. TV show names like Keddie Cabin 28. It's like
Oh yeah,
I can see it like a cabin in the woods kind of
yeah,
vibe to
yeah,
it,
yeah.
where something new happens each time, but it's the same actors or same people.
Like
But
Keddie Cabin 28, one cabin, many different. You know the Loki show where he goes into different.
yes,
What's it called?
goes back in timelines and it's different. Like
Yeah, different
it's like
timelines.
what if?
So
Yeah, so
Keddie Cabin
yeah.
28, the same cabin, different timelines, different murders, different evidence, different cases. Like that'd be such a cool. But it's like obviously the same actors as you said. It's the same family that stay there, but they get murdered different
Seems
ways.
like we just found a show to create, haven't we?
I know, right? Brought to you by At Sixes and Sevens.
Oh no, but what happened through like 1 to 27? Why is it 28?
That's just the cabin
It's gonna
number.
be Keddie Cabin. I know, but like episode 1, and then we get to 28, and then we do this murder. It's like, oh, funny.
I guess.
But yeah, going back to it, the most frustrating part of this case is the people who might know what really happened are dead.
Yeah.
The people who, well, they're either dead, missing, or they actually never came forward. Obviously, the therapist, they did come forward, but after years, so...
And then,
you know,
if they manage to keep a therapist quiet for a few years, who else have they managed to keep quiet for more than just a few years?
for life,
Yeah.
it's that. People might be in prison with all this information and not say anything. And even though that it could help them get their prison sentence, like
Oh yeah,
you know,
did you
reduced
hear
or something.
about the guy? Was it a week ago or something that said that his cellmate confessed to the Madeleine McCann murder? It was all over like Sky News and everything.
No,
Yeah,
that's the thing.
yeah, a guy confessed to the Madeleine McCann murders, and they're looking into it. So he was actually arrested, I think, on the suspicion of killing Maddie. I don't know. He was in prison anyway, and he confessed to one of his cellmates that he actually did murder Maddie. And if he kind of asked if they can extract DNA from bones that such a long time afterwards. Anyway, we'll talk about this after the recording. It's very interesting.
Yeah, no. Well, if people do want to know more about it, though, we might kind of put it on our Reddit, on our YouTube, and our links, which we'll always link below.
Yeah.
If you want to go and follow us on Reddit, it's r/@6s and7s. We've got a TikTok, we've got a Facebook, we've got all of the socials.
Absolutely. And the Keddie Cabin murders remain one of the creepiest, most baffling unsolved crimes in American history. The lack of answers, the mishandled evidence, and the possible conspiracies, it's all enough to make you question everything.
And that's kind of why I'm gonna do a funny here. We're left at 6s and 7s with this one.
Absolutely.
A cold case, a whole lot of chaos, murders, there's just so much to lean in on that we can't, because, you know, we'd probably go on for hours and hours and hours upon end. But no neat bow to tie it all up.
Just the way we like it, I guess.
But it is what it is, I guess, and that's all we have for today's episode. So we hope that we've left you sufficiently confused.
As always, thank you for joining us in this wild ride through chaos and mystery. And until next time.
If you do want to go and follow us, of course, go and follow our socials all below. There might not be a next episode. Will there, Rio?
We never know, I guess. We might get murdered in a cabin.
Is Very Sharp gonna do it?